You can imagine a world where there are very, very powerful AI models that are smarter than humans, in a very significant way, like doing fully automated cancer research, for example. Maybe we solve cancer in 15 years completely. I think that's a beautiful world that I would like to live in, and I think that would be amazing.
Hi, welcome to AI Confidential. I'm Aaron Fulkerson, the CEO of Opaque. This is the podcast where I sit down with industry experts to talk about the promise and potential of AI to create breakout industry leaders or to disrupt the incumbent leaders. After all, whoever controls the data controls the industry. For this episode, I sat down with Jason Clinton, the Chief Information Security Officer at Anthropic. We discussed everything from how Anthropic has been leading in AI safety with their responsible scaling policy to how confidential computing is essential to their strategy. And we covered the importance of AI security in a world where autonomous agents proliferate and will undoubtedly even be issued company laptops and become virtual employees, which is a fascinating topic to discuss and think about. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you do, please subscribe to AI Confidential wherever you get your podcast, and be sure to subscribe to our newsletter as well. Thanks for joining us. Jason, thanks so much for joining us on the AI Confidential podcast. It's wonderful to have you, and it's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here. This is exciting. And we've been talking about having a conversation for a while, so I'm glad it's finally happening.
Well, with Anthropic being a leader, perhaps the leader in responsible AI, it's fantastic to have you on the podcast and to share some of your expertise and background. Now, Anthropic's made significant investments in developing an architecture for securing your models and customers' data, as well as your own data, of course. Can you share the vision and strategy behind this?
Yeah, sure. So Anthropic is a public benefit corporation, which sounds like a change of topic, but it's very near and dear to the way that we think about having the way that the company is organized and the kind of protections that we put in place. So I think we'll talk about this later, but there is this requirement that we take security very seriously as a part of our public mission. And so from the very beginning, the company has invested a lot in security. We're about 7% of the company right now works in security adjacent areas. And as the models get more powerful, as they're capable of doing more things that fundamentally alter the economic landscape or make new technologies available, both for maybe solving some longstanding medical issue or helping with cybersecurity problems, the possible misuse of those capabilities also leads to concern. So we think about making sure that the model weights don't get stolen by threat actors as one of our core mission tenets. And so the company has a great deal of effort that's been going into making sure that we lock down our environment as much as possible. And it's really amazing as a CISO here, because so many people who deal with security teams, they always see the security team as slowing them down, or, the kind of challenges that you tend to see at a tech startup are we want to move really fast and maybe quote break things. That's the way that Silicon Valley has traditionally operated, but that is not the way that we run Anthropic. And so honestly, sometimes I have people asking for more security because we have people who work at Anthropic who are they feel like the Anthropic mission is really important part of the reason that they're working here, and they want to see more of the security being applied.
When you talk about companies or individuals stealing your models, explore that a little more deeply for somebody who might be unfamiliar with cyber, bio, nuclear concerns. Talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so it's both a question of protecting customer data and customers' interest in securing their workloads, but also yes, this concern about what would happen if a threat actor of some type were to take the model weights and then use them in a way where they disabled the safety safeguards. So these are more things that will become more of a concern as models get more powerful. And so to be a responsible actor in this ecosystem, we submit ourselves to testing. We just recently announced, for example, that we've done an engagement with the US AI Safety Institute and one also with the UK AI Safety Institute, testing for things like the ability for the models to uplift, someone's ability to to reveal nuclear secrets or something of that nature, right? Those are the kinds of concerns that we think are coming further down the line. But the findings for now are that those capabilities don't exist. That said, like, we can't start working on security when that threat arises. Like, you have to think about customer security today, making sure that we're locking down and making it, very, very secure. So confidential computing is part of that. Today, so that when that does happen, we're ready. You can't just, start from zero and reach, full defensive capabilities overnight. So, this has been part of Anthropic's journey for the last several years now.
You mentioned confidential computing. Obviously, that's something that's near and dear to our heart on this podcast and something that we frequently cover. It seems essential technology for your strategy. Can you share your point of view on the importance of confidential computing?
Yes, absolutely. So as we think about the models getting more powerful, the kind of threat actors that we're talking about are ones where we're interested in making sure that even in the case where that threat actor has managed to get into the infrastructure somehow, then they still cannot get access to the model weights or customer props and completion. So that has been something that we've been spending a lot of energy designing for. Last week, in fact, we announced with Amazon and AWS on stage that we had jointly developed a confidential computing approach for the Trainium 2 chips that were announced that last week. And so, in 2025, the first half of 2025, we anticipate that we'll have a something to show there that customers can see that the confidential computing features have been enabled for that environment, which is a very compelling story to be telling around this. And I think as we look to the broader ecosystem, we see other players sort of also thinking about this problem from the same perspective. For example, Microsoft recently announced that they have a confidential inference product. The NVIDIA Blackwell architecture will have the ability to do confidential computing with like a low performance penalty relative to the existing H200s. So there's a significant amount of industry momentum here, and I would love to see more players offering confidential computing that enables us to deploy AI faster and more broadly than we currently can. And I think there's a lot of partners in the ecosystem who would like to forward deploy Claude in their environment, and having more technological underpinnings in this space would help assuage some of our concerns around our infrastructure design and that kind of thing.
You're talking about security as an accelerant to innovation, which makes total sense to me here. And we see this with our customers at Opaque, where because they can run confidential workloads that are attested and certified, or confidential pipelines, it allows them to innovate more swiftly. But for those who might be newer to the concept, can you speak with specifics, to the extent you're comfortable, about how confidential computing helps you accelerate your innovation?
In a world where you're training very powerful models that we don't know really what the capabilities are yet, we need to be able to create a safe sandbox where the research team can be working with those models and have high degree of confidence that the models are both protected from the researchers making mistake. They might make a typo and accidentally have the model try to reach out to the internet, or they might accidentally copy the model to the wrong place. Like, if you have all of the security primitives in place, then it makes it easier for the research team to move faster, because they can just iterate quickly and experiment with new and crazy ideas without having to go back and forth as a security team a lot. So that's something that I'm really looking forward to deploying confidential computing for in our research environment. It makes that safe sandbox environment where innovation can occur without getting slowed down or bogged down by like a lot of back and forth. On the technology platforms itself, the cryptographic primitives that underpin confidential computing enable certain kinds of like traditional security controls to have much more substantial meaning. For example, there's the NIST Secure Software Development Framework, the SSDF, that has been recently adopted for AI models. And in an AI version of the SSDF, you want your computing environment to do an automatic assertion that the model that's being deployed has provenance associated with it. So those are very useful and important controls that help us get confidence in the integrity of the software supply chain that goes into the operating environment. And as these cryptographic primitives and the identity of the serving job sort of are tethered to confidential computing and other PETs, those kinds of things are important for making sure that every part of the development's life cycle is taking the best controls and the best practices from across the industry and using them for deployment.
I occasionally will hear, oh, confidential computing, it's been around for, I guess it's been 9 years now. And occasionally folks will be like, it's been around 9 years, it hasn't really taken off. Do you have any thoughts on the evolution of confidential computing? It's become so essential to your work and our customers being able to unlock AI, but you speak from your own perspective about the evolution of the technology.
Yeah, a couple of things that have made it difficult for folks to adopt it. First of all, AMD SEV is probably like a technology, what I would consider a breakthrough in this space that has enabled simultaneously with their increasing lead over Intel chips, this much more possible. So if you are going to a cloud provider and they have AMD chips in the set of machines that you might allocate for workloads, you do have these features available to you that would help bootstrap the confidential computing environment. Also, Kubernetes has gotten much better in terms of the technology stack and its maturity, which means it's easier to schedule pods or stateful sets that sort of have confidential computing features enabled. So there's a software story here and a hardware story. It is, of course, the case that other platforms outside of those two that I just mentioned are also pushing for confidential computing for different reasons. There's a trending line as well of what you might consider the long tail of, quote, on-prem customers who have wanted to move to cloud but haven't had the technology that they need to feel confident that their data is isolated, even if it's staying inside of their VPC inside of a cloud environment. And, the confidential computing story has been unlocked because these cloud service providers have been thinking, okay, how can we move the needle on, making it impossible for any employee who works at our company to be compromised in a way that would affect that environment. So those are possible things to be thinking about. But of course, the primary reason that this has, I think, been going is that people are excited about having a really good compliance story, which is it's impossible for anybody but the company itself to have access to the data, and that gives customers and their customers confidence that the platform is meeting their requirements.
Yeah, that's super helpful. And I know that we've talked about this, and from my perspective, AI is the killer application for confidential computing. When you have models that are incredibly valuable and potentially dangerous, it becomes increasingly important that you have guarantees around securing them. And then similarly, when these models are operating on data that could be very sensitive because it's proprietary or regulated or customer data, and it's accessing it in a non-deterministic manner, and it's uncertain what they're doing with the data. Again, confidential computing, being able to build confidential data pipelines are just really critical. And then to your point, it hasn't been until very recently that you could even access confidential computing primitives through the cloud service providers. I mean, I think it's been a few years. And like you said, Kubernetes come a long way. But furthermore, confidential GPUs weren't even available until H100. So if you want high performance AI workloads, you have to have GPUs. And they only became available through cloud service providers a few months ago, literally in September on Azure with their confidential VMs which are AMD SEV, like you called out underneath with H100s. So it's been remarkable how quickly this technology's become adopted just in the last 2 years around AI workloads with Gen AI, or for that matter, Apple. I mean, gosh, their private cloud is confidential computing, and it's been adopted wholesale by Apple.
Yeah. I think it's really good to give Apple praise for the amazing work that they did for private cloud compute and the way that they announced it and explained it to their customers. I think that a lot of folks have felt like confidential computing for a long time was obscure and difficult to explain. But Apple, in the way that they announced it, I think it was WWDC that they announced it, just really made it very crisp. Oh, like this has like a very clear customer proposition. And they did an amazing engineering effort on that effort, that work as well, so that you have confidence that, the claims aren't specious. So there's a lot of things that we can learn from, like ways to communicate and ways to be transparent about the way confidential computing works from that. So I think it created a moment, and it's been really exciting to see, all of these additional industry players like embrace confidential computing as a core and important part of the AI story.
You've previously spoken about how AI's exponential growth has outpaced security frameworks. In other words, existing security privacy safeguards have really become obsolete in the face of unprecedented AI capabilities. Could you expound upon that?
Yeah, sure. So for background, I think maybe it's super important to just understand where we are as an industry. So if you look at the 1957 research publication of the perceptron, and look at the total amount of compute that went into that, and then you look at every single machine learning or AI related breakthrough for the last 70 years, it's been pretty much 4x year over year. There's been some dips and some spikes, but about 4x year over year increase in the total amount of compute that has gone into AI models since then. So what's happening now was very predictable in the sense that if you just, and there were people in the early 2010s who said AI is coming, this is going to be a big deal. Because if you just look at the 4x year over year growth, an exponential curve is phenomenally difficult to plan for. And, we find ourselves flat footed today now because of that, right? Like, for example, if you wanted an AI agent to be an assistant to an employee, so let's move beyond chatbots. I think chatbots are last year. We're sort of an agent world now. And I think we can talk a bit about the future as well. Let's assume that one of your employees asks a agent to help them with a task, and that task is being executed, and folks are waiting for the response to come back. While that agent is doing all of that work, it's going to be operating as some system service account somewhere, right? But it's also doing work on behalf of a person, work that would have previously been done by a human being. So all of your SIM logs in your infrastructure, for example, where they would have previously shown the human being access a bunch of documents, as an example, or databases. Now it's this AI agent, right? You've lost visibility into who the actor is, what's the accountability story for maybe somebody accessing data that they're not supposed to be accessing. All of these challenges are in front of us, and we don't have anything in any of the compliance frameworks that helps us with the identity and the human in the loop aspects of AI systems. This is all new ground. There are folks who are starting to think about this. ISO 42K1 just came out, and it just now is starting to basically says you have to have a risk management framework, but it doesn't say what it is or what technologies you might use to help solve these problems. All of these challenges are facing us now, and we don't have big frameworks to point to sort of help guide the way that we think about these problems. And one of the ways that Anthropic has tried to deal with this to act as a responsible player on the frontier, and this applies more to the frontier model maker side as opposed to the customer side, but it's still important. We drafted our own compliance regime that's sort of like a blueprint for what we think regulation might look like in the future, and that is taking the form of something called the responsible scaling policy. So as models get more powerful, there are more security and deployment controls that we need to put in place for both the model weights problem that I mentioned earlier, but also for trust and safety issues that will come up around misuse and abuse, and maybe somebody might try to use a model for offensive cyber operations, for example. That would be something that we would hope that everybody who's deploying AI models is putting defenses in place to guard against. Anthropic certainly has. And as you get to a more powerful model, those defenses need to be more powerful as well. So an ASL4 model, we use the biosafety levels as our framework from the CDC. So where biosafety level 5 is equivalent to AI safety level 5. So that would be the most dangerous or most challenging models. And we're at AI safety level 2 right now on that 5-point scale. I think it's pretty likely within the next 6 months we'll hit ASL 3. And we have been planning for the increased security controls that go with that and deployment controls as well. But an ASL 4 model might be as soon as 2 years away from now. And an ASL 4 model would be able to fully automate a nation state level sort of offensive cyber campaign. So we have to be out to be planning in advance and building the security and the trust and safety controls to be sure that we're ready by the time that occurs.
There's so much you just covered there. Let me unpack a few different parts.
Yeah, let's do it.
First, already we're seeing companies adopt agentic architectures for building software applications. One of our customers, ServiceNow, we have several doing this, but the ServiceNow, since it's near and dear to my heart, comes up to mind. They have, instead of a collection of web services that are interoperating as part of an application interface, it's a collection of agents. They're running these agents as confidential agents inside of Opaque. And the significance and importance of that is what you've just said. How do you know who created that agent and that agent is who it says that it is? And how do you put some guarantees and controls around what data it's accessed? How do you log that in a manner that's verifiable? Because if an agent is operating semi-autonomously and eventually autonomously, it creates just tremendous vulnerabilities to your security. So you talked about this, and I'm putting a finer point on a really important one that you mentioned, just to make sure that our listeners are understanding this. It becomes even more interesting in terms of its security vulnerability when that agent is issued at a company laptop and becomes a virtual employee.
Yeah. I'm so glad you brought this up. So 4 weeks ago, Anthropic showed a demo for the first time of autonomous computer use. So the idea is that you give, an isolated sort of virtual machine, the model access to that. And then once the model's there, you say, open the web browser, go to this website, fill out this form, search for this thing, watch this video, tell me about it, write a report, all of those things. Anything you can do on a computer, you can do in this environment. And it's still early days. I think, we're working on improving its ability to achieve these tasks fully autonomously. But it's not going to be that long before, maybe by the end of next year, you could imagine a world where, an entire, the typical day-to-day workflow of maybe an intern is fully automated through the use of a computer. If you just think about there are lots of things that we do in the workplace that don't have APIs and may never have APIs, but they are designed to be interacted with by a human using a computer interface. And if an AI can just use a computer, using that person's credentials or maybe with that person's sort of oversight, so you can imagine a world where somebody says, I want to achieve something. And every time it's about to click the mouse or do an action, it just sort of asks for approval from the human that this is okay. All of those things I think are going to be in widespread use by the end of next year, which opens up a whole litany of questions about accountability and tracing and, making sure that we have robust risk controls so that we understand what's the worst possible outcome for some of these kinds of things. It's going to be really interesting to see how 2025 plays out in this space. It is like an agent, like you said, but it's the next step. It's almost like long horizon virtual employee task. I like the way you said that, virtual employee.
Yeah, the idea here that is so relevant to the core capabilities of confidential computing is, well, actually, you provide some context around that, Jason. Why is confidential computing in this scenario even more essential?
Yeah. So let's think about, for example, a healthcare use case. So in a healthcare use case, you have HIPAA regulations that are so importantly a part of the way that we treat data in the United States, at least. in a HIPAA context, you want a very, very high degree of confidence that patient data has no opportunity to leak to a sub-processor that's not declared in your HIPAA. And it just so happens Anthropic has HIPAA regulations, but maybe you just prefer not to have that exposure. So an employee working in a healthcare field, like maybe in insurance processing or some other task that involves medical records, they're going to be using their computer to do that work. And if the virtual employee is in the loop for that work, you would want a very high degree of confidence that that data isn't going somewhere else, and you are not bringing the possibility of a HIPAA data breach in scope for PHI, the personal health information that's protected by the regulation. So it's a very compelling compliance story. It's a nearly infallible sort of isolation of the data from the AI model. And in that environment, the virtual employee can be guaranteed that nothing that they're doing is going to deviate or propagate into systems that are not in scope for what's been authorized for that HIPAA authorization.
That's a great point. So you have the guarantees of regulatory compliance. You also have the ability to certify that this virtual agent is who it says that it is, because that could get very confusing when you have a proliferation of these virtual agents that are interoperating. Also, you have the ability to create a complete audit trail that's signed by the hardware, the GPUs or CPUs that did the execution for this virtual employee.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up. So many of the identity platforms today already have this idea of, Google calls this context-aware access. Okta has something in this space. Azure Intra also has this concept. The idea is you can only do work in the corporate portal systems, like things that are inside your corporate environment, if the request is coming from a hardware signed token, or a cookie that comes from that laptop. That's very much a part of the MDM management strategy for every enterprise today. Now we would be extending MDM endpoint management from laptops to virtual machines running in confidential computing environments. So that confidential computing hardware can attest that the operating environment for the AI agent is fully authorized as the operating environment. You can use the same existing MDM, context-aware access, whatever it is, principles that tie the hardware to the request to the use of all your existing internal corp resources. So very powerful zero trust principles can be recycled from existing security programs in this.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's easier to also have the traceability around every interaction, every data entity touched. One of the other things that's interesting too is the models we have today, it's safe to say, are vastly inferior to the models we're going to have in 2 years.
Yep, that exponential curve, exactly. Yep.
Yeah, and already today, the chatbots are incredibly good at persuading people without them even knowing that they're being persuaded. So in this near future world, in 12 plus months from now, when you have these agents and virtual employees, it's really important who created that agent and having traceability related to them, because they can be their personality can include intent to persuade towards specific outcomes, and they're remarkably good at it with the models we have today.
Yeah, can you imagine a couple of years from now getting a DM on your company's internal chatbot that says, "Hi, I'm the agent who's acting on behalf of your coworker Brittany, and I'm trying to achieve this task. I've been working on it for a few weeks, and I'm blocked on this one thing. Can you help me with this?" That's going to happen. We're going to have AI agents that take on the attributes of humans because they're trained on human data, right? They come from a baseline understanding of how we interact at work, because we've been talking about it on the internet for decades. And so when they reach out, they'll look just like a coworker, a virtual coworker. And I think it'll be important to, when you get that message from this agent, have confidence that it's not a phishing attack. It's not a an attacker in your network that's trying to get you to do something, and having that degree of confidence is going to be super important.
Speaking of phishing attacks, like I think those of us in tech companies who have titles are probably very familiar with the how common these are. But just for listeners who are unaware, today, every week, there's a phishing attack on Opaque where somebody is pretending to be me or another executive at the company. And they're reaching out via text messages. And their message is very tailored. Like they're following what's going on LinkedIn and other places and tailoring the message to, hey, this is Aaron. I'm in New York right now at NASDAQ with the NASDAQ customer account, and I need you to transfer this, or I need you to go buy these gift cards. It's remarkable how good it is today with finite labor, right? These are human beings somewhere in the world that are perpetuating these attacks. Now imagine an intelligent agent that could execute on this, and perhaps one that could easily infiltrate your own network. Like it's just the importance of being able to attest who is this person and being able to do, or this entity, because it's not a human being, and being able to do tracing on it is just so critical. It's absolutely critical. And obviously, computing makes this all so much easier.
Yeah, cryptographic primitives and having that like confidence is going to be helpful. I do think that everyone needs to prepare for the coming cybersecurity landscape changing. There have been 3 or 4 papers published on like fully automated vulnerability discovery. So AI agents going through source code and open source projects and looking for and finding and identifying, previously unknown 0 days. That's the kind of world we're going into. I think next year is going to be pretty urgent in the sense of like trying to get patches out for those discoveries as soon as possible. But then after that, I think things will calm down as we sort of like, find the low hanging fruit in existing open source software. And then, these agents will turn towards proprietary software next. There's lots of challenges ahead of us. It's just like everything else in the decades that both of us have been in tech, right? Like everything changes every year. There's never been a year that something wasn't changing, and the landscape getting more of a what's the phrase from evolutionary theory? The Red Queen hypothesis. You have to run faster and faster just to stay in the same place, and that's going to continue to be the case for those of us in cybersecurity. And I think folks need to be prepared for changes. As always, there were changes.
With the rapid growth of generative AI, what new or evolving challenges do you foresee for companies when it comes to maintaining privacy and data sovereignty? So thinking more specifically around a company must control their proprietary data or they're going to get disrupted. Like we're seeing this in a variety of any industry that's got enterprise scale with distribution partners or supply chain partners. And there's some infamous examples I won't go into because I don't want to name names. Whomever is able to collect the data from a distribution side or a supply chain side has the ability to completely disrupt that industry. And now, and again, I say it's enterprise scale, right? And once you're at a certain enterprise scale and there's billions and billions of dollars at stake, it becomes almost irresponsible for a company not to collect the data if it's available. Like you have a fiduciary responsibility, your shareholders. So whomever is able to collect the data on supply chain or distribution partners is going to own that industry and take control of it. So what do you see changing with generative AI? I mean, we're seeing some tactical things around like data masking being obsolete, but what else?
There's so many things I could say here. So I think it's important that customers be thinking, anybody adopting AI, be thinking about that old adage, data is the new oil, or oil is the new data. I don't know. Data is the new oil, I think is the right phrase. And in that world, so much of the way that we think about innovation that's occurring here is like, if your company's business model or the way that you're thinking about business intelligence is, I'm just going to like send an AI and look at public data sources and documents that are available inside of our company and assume that that's going to make us have a competitive advantage, then I think that there's a chance that in a particular industry, especially the ones that you mentioned with like logistical data challenges, there's going to be competitors who have more proprietary data who have more opportunity to make intelligent, earlier, and faster decisions using AI, who could run circles around you in the market because they have that data advantage. And so I don't know, in an individual industry, there might be different proprietary data sources that each individual company has to deal with or think about. But the general pattern is true. If we are entering a world where intelligence and automated intelligence and analysis is the currency by which companies operate more efficiently, effectively, and with lower overhead, you need the data to be able to do that. You need your AIs that are working in your company to have the data that they need to make good decisions. And if you're not collecting the data from, just the day-to-day business operations, science is making the invisible visible. So like if you can bring metrics up as a first order, line of inquiry from the executive leadership team, like making sure that people are collecting those metrics and collecting data where it will help the business make better decisions, then you're going to be prepared for an AI revolution when it comes, because you'll have all of the data that your AIs need. And if you use, the right security technologies, you can be guaranteed that data, that proprietary data, is not leaking to competitors or being used for training data in AI models. Our AI models to date have not used any customer data. And if you deploy on one of the cloud providers, like AWS, like Anthropic has no access to customer data on AWS. So an AWS customer is completely isolated from Anthropic, and we can never train on customer data in that scenario. So important to be asking those questions as you adopt AI models, and providers, especially these. Especially integrators, the integrators or the infrastructure as a service providers, like those folks, ask them, like, where does my data go? Where is my data pipeline? Leaving my VPC, is there any opportunity for my data to be used for training? Like, those are important questions to be asking. And in some cases, some organizations are even going back to old archives that have been stored in vaults on tapes for decades, and going, oh, well, now data is very valuable. Let's get those tapes out and bring some of that old data back up so that we can start using it to analyze. And I think that's going to be a trend and a pattern that's going to repeat over and over again as the economy shifts even more towards automation.
We've seen this with, particularly in financial services industries, where there's companies we work with that have data that goes back 40 years for like bond trading data that nobody else on the planet has. And they want to be able to monetize that in perpetuity. And they want to be able to put it into a private cloud, but be able to still run algorithms or AI workloads on top of it so that their third-party partners can benefit from the data without it leaking. Obviously, private cloud or confidential computing being the only way that I'm aware of being able to do this. It only puts a finer point on the importance of it. Pick a time horizon, 5, 10, 20 years down the road, whatever you think is the appropriate time horizon for you to make a prediction on how AI is going to affect our lives in profound and different ways that perhaps people haven't thought about. We've talked about some, but you're so entrenched in this, Jason. I'm curious from your perspective, what time horizon, what's something that people probably haven't thought about?
This is a good question. So Dario was recently on a podcast and talked about his timelines, and I think I'll point there.
It was the Lex Friedman one, right?
Yeah.
By the way, excellent podcast, Dario on Lex Friedman's podcast. Strong recommend. There's a bunch of folks from Anthropic on that one.
Yeah, it's riveting. And also Amanda Askell is on there as well, talking about the way that we use philosophy and ethics to shape the character of Claude and the AI's ethical core. So very, very exciting podcast. Dario on there said, I think something like a 40% chance of a powerful, smarter than human sort of intelligence, like, 5-ish years from now. I think he might have said something like that. I think that that seems pretty likely. And in that world, I don't know that we immediately see like pretty significant economic impact. But if you fast forward 10 years out or 15 years out from that, you can imagine a world where there are very, very powerful AI models that are smarter than humans in a very significant way, like doing fully automated cancer research, for example. Maybe we solve cancer in 15 years completely. I think that's a beautiful world that I would like to live in, and I think that would be amazing. I've had family members affected by cancer, and I think that would be a phenomenal outcome for humanity to have that occur. Dario also published this essay called "The Machines of Loving Grace" that sort of like lines out this beneficial, optimistic outcome for humanity here. But there's so many things that you can extrapolate from here. You can imagine a world where like fully automated factory is an AI model, or an AI model that's very good at performing an automated construction of a space station. Like why do we still in the year 2024 not have a space station that we can use that's robust against different kinds of challenges? All of these things are challenges that humanity is going to face, and AI is going to unlock them. And I think that the world is going to look radically different in 15 years. And, for some of us, I think, we think, oh, well, my career will be sort of, winding down by the time that'll happen. But, for those of us who have kids or family members, they'll be living in a world where maybe no one codes anymore. You just ask an AI to write software and it writes it. So you need to start thinking about these things. Like, should somebody go into a computer science program? Probably if they're really excited about the science aspect, but if they were doing it just to be a coder, like maybe that's not a great decision. So those impacts are on the horizon, and people should be thinking about them now.
Yeah, that's a great summary of a variety of different areas that we can expect to see AI impacting our lives. So how long until we have a von Neumann probe then?
Yeah, we need the space station first, I think, right? So,
von Neumann probe's a self-replicate. For those of you who are unfamiliar, it's a self-replicating space probe that you can explore the universe with, because it would self-replicate. It's a interesting thought experiment that
fully automated asteroid mining is also, I think, required for that. So there's a great sci-fi book that's just a joy to read that's in this space that I love recommending, and that's the Babaverse series.
Yeah, I've read it. It's great. It's fun.
It's so good.
It's so good. It's fun. Okay, Jason, thank you so much for your time. It's been a delight to talk to you as always. It's always enlightening.
Same as well. Thanks for the invite. It was a great conversation.
Thank you for tuning in. This was our final episode of the first season of AI Confidential. It's been really a delightful journey. I've had this opportunity to speak with all of these incredibly accomplished people that are absolutely brilliant in their industry and learn from them. I hope you've enjoyed the journey as well. If you like the show and want to learn more about these topics, check out our website at opaque.co. That's .co. If you like the podcast, please subscribe and leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. We really want to hear from you, so we'd love your feedback. And be sure to tune in for Season 2, coming in 2025. This episode of AI Confidential was produced by Opaque, the leading confidential AI platform. I'm Aaron Fulkerson, and I'll see you next time. Thanks again for joining us.